I grew up in a small, quiet village that looked like something out of an old postcard. Rolling hills, one grocery store, two churches, and a handful of gossip that never died. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and that meant you could never outrun a reputation once it stuck. I was the middle child of three. My father was a quiet, hard-working man who believed emotions were best left unsaid. My mother was his opposite, strict about traditions. The kind of woman who still ironed tablecloths and quoted scripture at breakfast. Together, they built a life that looked respectable from the outside. But inside that home, there was a clear hierarchy. My brother, the golden one, me, the disappointment, and my sister, the princess who could do no wrong. My older brother, Mark, was already winning before I even learned to ride a bike. Straight A student, captain of the soccer team, charm that made adults melt. He grew up to sell cars. Fitting, really, since he's been selling versions of himself all his life. Mark married young, to a polite, soft-spoken woman named Claire. And they had two sons who seemed to inherit every ounce of his energy. At family dinners, he'd boast about their sports trophies, his new powerboat, and his latest sales commission. He said it was mentorship, but it always felt more like a performance. I was the audience, the brother he could measure himself against to feel taller. Meanwhile, I was the opposite of everything he represented. Quiet, bookish, and painfully aware of how out of place I was. I had asthma, couldn't run without wheezing, and was the kid who cried too easily. At school, I was the one who sat out during gym class, sketching superheroes in my notebook, while everyone else chased a ball across the field. My parents didn't see asthma as a real issue. Just toughen up, my dad would say. My mom would sigh and mutter that I needed to pray harder. I learned early that being sensitive wasn't welcome in our house. By the time I graduated high school, my GPA barely scraped 2.5. Mark already had a full-time job and a fiancé. I had a backpack full of half-written stories and no plan. College was supposed to be my restart. I saved up, enrolled, and lasted a year and a half before depression and burnout pulled me under. Dropping out felt like failure carved in stone. My parents were furious. My brother called me a quitter. I packed what I could fit in my old car and left the village. My younger sister, Emily, was still a teenager then. She was adored, protected in ways I never was. When she got married at 19, the wedding looked like a fairy tale. She had 3 kids soon after, and somewhere in that chaos, I stopped hearing from her much. When we did meet, she treated me like the family's running joke, kindly but distant. For a long time, I worked at a comic book and video game store. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. Surrounded by people who understood my interests, I finally felt at home. That's where I met Alex, another self-described geek with big dreams and the kind of mind that could see opportunity where others didn't. Together, we started a small IT support business from his basement. What began as fixing computers for locals turned into something much bigger. Within a few years, we had corporate contracts, steady clients, and a reputation for reliability. When a large tech company approached us with an acquisition offer, we accepted. I walked away with cash, stock options, and something new: confidence. I invested carefully, started a few side projects, and somehow, through a mix of luck and stubborn effort, my net worth crossed $1 million before I turned 35. But I never bragged. I still lived in a small 2-bedroom house, drove an old Saturn, and wore the same kind of hoodies I always had. If you saw me on the street, you'd think I was just another mid-level tech guy. That suited me fine. Every Sunday, my parents expected me to drive across the state for dinner. It took nearly 2 hours each way. They never considered how much of my weekend it consumed, just assumed that because I was single, I had nothing better to do. Those dinners were always the same. My mom cooking too much food, my dad half listening to conversations, my sister chatting about her kids, and Mark dominating the table with stories of sales numbers and vacations. When the spotlight turned to me, it was never kind. "Still playing video games for a living?" my dad would joke. "Ever think about getting married?" my mom would ask. They had no idea I was the CTO of a startup. I tried telling them once, but the moment I said tech, Mark cut in with some half-baked opinion about how computers run themselves these days. I stopped trying after that. Then came the shock. One night, I received a notification about an attempted access to my credit report. Someone trying to pull financial data without authorization. Given my cybersecurity background, I traced it easily. The trail led straight to a local private investigation firm. And the client? My brother. He'd actually hired a PI to dig into my life. Later, he told my parents it was out of concern, that he thought I was hiding financial trouble or drinking too much. But I knew better. Mark wanted proof that I was failing so he could play hero again. What he got instead was the full picture: the house, the assets, the stock portfolio, my role as CTO. It turned the narrative upside down. For the first time, my parents realized their disappointment wasn't struggling. He was thriving. The irony? Mark's investigation into me exposed everything he didn't want seen. Anger turned to curiosity. So, I hired the same PI to look into him. The file I got back was thick. Behind the facade of success, Mark was drowning. 3 mortgages, back payments to the IRS, maxed out credit cards, and several reports of domestic disturbance. There were even 2 prior arrests for driving under the influence. Quietly buried, but there. His perfect life was hanging by a thread. It was almost poetic justice. When Sunday rolled around, I went to dinner as usual. Only this time, I came prepared. The atmosphere was strange from the start. My parents were overly polite. My mom even complimented my career, something she'd never done before. Mark looked uneasy, like he knew what was coming. Halfway through dinner, he started bragging again, talking about a huge commission and a promotion at work. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Congratulations. That'll help with those IRS back payments." The table went silent. Mark's fork froze midair. My dad frowned. My mom blinked like she hadn't heard me right. I followed up gently. "Oh, sorry. You probably didn't want to talk about that in front of everyone." The silence that followed could have split the room in 2. He tried to deny it, but when I slid the PI report across the table, his face drained of color. My parents turned on him immediately, angry, embarrassed, confused. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd used that same investigator to dig into my life, and that same investigator had handed me the truth about his what followed wasn't just an argument. It was years of buried resentment erupting all at once. Accusations flew across the table. My parents blamed each other for favoritism. My brother shouted about betrayal. My sister sat frozen, clutching her husband's arm, while the kids stared at their plates. For the first time, I didn't shrink into the background. I didn't apologize or make excuses. I just sat there, calm, and let the truth do the talking. It was chaos, but beneath it all, I felt something new: freedom. That night, the image of the perfect family shattered, and I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn approval from people who never really saw me. Since that dinner, things have changed. My parents call me more often now, but it feels different. Their respect feels forced, like they're still adjusting to the new family order. Mark avoids me completely. The few times we've spoken, he keeps things short, defensive, and cold. My therapist says this might be the healthiest outcome possible, that sometimes exposure brings healing, even if it starts with chaos. I don't know if I believe that yet, but what I do know is this: for the first time in my life, I'm not the failure of the family. I'm just me, finally seen for who I am.